Okay, so now that the cover is completed and both of the inside covers have been attached, we just need to attach the cover to the pages. It's a pretty simple process because you've already attached it to here. You sort of know what we're going to do. We're just going to pop this piece into this little pocket that I've made, and then stitch it down. Get the cover as close as possible to the pages. You don't want it so close that you can't open the book. The cover needs to line up with this edge of your pages. So the inside cover is where the front cover lines up with the front cover. So anyway, I will pin this edge, pin one end, and I'll just make sure, yep, that that's nice and smooth along there. And now I can tuck in the other end a bit easier. It has just come apart just a fraction there because I didn't backstitch, but it doesn't matter because when I do the stitching, that will be held in place. It does take a little bit of fiddling to get it right. Try and make sure that it's the same sort of distance at either end. Once you get that one in place, just pin it down. Just close your book. Make sure that your cover's in the right spot, that this edge is hanging out. Remember, I made this one a tiny bit bigger all around, so that looks about right to me. And I'll just put an extra pin in the middle here, just pulling it tight so that the inside cover doesn't hang over the edge, but not so tight that you cause the front cover to buckle. And that gap there should be about the same as that one. And that looks fairly even along there. If you like, you can put extra pins in there, but it's not necessary. And the final step will be to stitch it down there, which means that there will be a line of stitching along here. So what I'll probably do with this cover is I'll stitch along there, but also go around there like a top stitching, so that it just looks, there's not just stitching down the one side. So we'll do that, and then after it's stitched, I'll do the back cover the same way. So I would tuck this in. The back cover's a little easier once you've got the front cover done. Tuck that in there and close it. And then see what happens when you open it. It pops out. And even there, that's not quite right. So close it up, and then I will pop the pin in there while it's closed. It's a little tricky, and you may find that you're pinned into the next page, so just pull it out. That's it. And the same at the other end. While it's closed, I'll pin it. Open it up, make sure it opens, and you can see how that is pulling open. So we want to do the same thing on the back. We'll just pin it. Pin that middle bit down. And just double check that your book's working correctly. And that's it. Another row of stitching around the edge. And that will be complete. Okay, so now I've finished my journal. I added stitching on the spine. And this is a quick look through. Sometimes I add bulky items, like these little gemstones are quite bulky. And lots of beads. If I add beads, I try not to have beads on the other page, because I did that once in one of my other journals and they kept catching on each other. So you just have to be aware of what you're doing on opposite pages. And I really enjoy adding quotes. Now I thought I would show you how an alternative cover, if you have something that's really stiff that you want to use for your cover page. I have made this one for this journal, and it's quite stiff because this is plastic canvas. So I've cut it to size. So I've got my cover. I haven't put stiffening on the back of this one because it's quite stiff, but I've also cut the inside cover from an old quilt, and I have put one layer of stitching on this one, and this will go inside the cover like that. And I've done the same. I'm using for the back, again it's the same size as the cover and the pages, and I've stiffened the back. This is just embossed felt, and I have another big piece of the quilt which I have also stiffened. So the back will end up with 2 layers of stiffening to make it a little sturdier. Now I'm going to attach these, and I'm going to have a spine out of the same felt, and I'm going to bind the edges with more of the felt. Because I'm using quilts, the edges need to be covered. I've cut the strips 3/4 of an inch because on this front piece I don't want too much of this green covered, so I've got them quite small. On the other books that I've done, I've actually cut the felt for the binding about an inch, so that when it's folded over it's actually about 1/2 inch wide, but the look is entirely up to you how wide you make your strips. The spine, again, I've measured it. I've only added a little bit at the front, so it will come around like that. And the back, it doesn't really matter if it overlaps a lot or a little. So I've just added a bit extra. I've put the interfacing on the inside, so the front and back should overlap about that much. So that's all the pieces cut. Each of these bits of binding felt, I've got 2 for the length and 4 to go top and bottom, front and back cover. So now I'll show you how to attach. We've got our spine piece, same as the other book that I've already showed you. The front, the inside cover, which I haven't done yet. I should have done that before I showed you. But I need to just put a piece of binding along there, but I'll use bias binding for that so it won't stand out. Or I might even just zigzag satin stitch along there. But once you've neatened up that one edge, line it up. It's exactly the same way as you're adding a page, but this time it's the cover. So you line it up, pin it, pop your cover on top, again lining it up, pin it, and then we just stitch it down there and all the way around. Once it's stitched on, attaching the bindings and spine are also the same. Pop it on there, stitch down, and then stitch on the bindings. Okay, now I'm ready to show you the finished book. I ended up attaching the spine by hand just because I'd stitched around the binding by hand, stitched around there by hand, so I decided to do the same up there so that this front is more of a border. On the inside you can see the bias binding that I applied over the edge of the quilted piece. So I did that before I attached it to the cover. Then I had the sandwich of the cover. I stitched around it with the machine. I stitched the binding on at the back by machine, and then I folded the edge over and stitched the front down. But you could, if you like, you could easily do that by machine as well. And the back is exactly the same. I've hand stitched the binding around the edge, and the back spine overlaps a bit further than it does on the front, and that doesn't really matter too much. And again, you can see how I've put a piece of binding along that inside edge. And that's it, your book's complete. I've got the spine quite tight. With a fabric book it doesn't matter if it's tight. If you're doing a paper book you need to leave the spine sticking out a little bit away so that you can open the pages, but the fabric book is very flexible so you don't need to do that. And when I folded this over to the inside, I had to snip a little piece of it and fold that to there, and then I folded that inside there, and then I just did that bit of stitching. But you could do that little, sew that down by machine if you do it before you attach it to the cover. And that's it, the book's complete. I have details of most of these pages on my blog. Not full instructions of how I've done them, but there's usually some level of instruction. It's a great way to show off little samples that you might have made or experiments you've done. And because it's an art journal, I like to add quotes, as I do with a painted art journal. I often add quotes, but as you can see, not on every page. And you can put whatever you like in your book. This is entirely paper, and it still works in here in the context of this book, I think. So, I hope you've enjoyed having a look through my journals. If you want more details, they'll be on my blog, artygirl2010 at blogspot.com. Thank you.